to work with. So TikTok, this is the main project page. I put a link in the Google document to it, but you can see it up here as well if you want to go to and follow along. The project page has a bunch of examples, and then the GitHub page, which we might go into some detail later, is more about the code and some more options about install and stuff like that. So as you'll see, it's pretty basic. It's very vertical. You have a title, and then you have your items, your entries as we call them in TikTok, and each one has a date, a title, and some sort of description. And then there's also ability to put in some media, like this picture of a cat. And then these get grouped sort of automatically into years or months or decades, depending on the time span of your data. So I'll just go through some of the basics on this example here. So you have your title, and then your description can include any HTML that you want, and so it's really easy to sort of format and add things as you need it. When you add a media field, that'll get thrown over here to the right, depending on the size. So if we go to a little smaller here, you'll see that it sort of scrunches up to a mobile-friendly view. Another field is the source field, and that adds a little bit of source information to your media. If you don't do a description with your entry, the media field will fill the whole space when you're on a larger screen. So that will always happen anyway if you're on mobile. And then there's it handles sort of embedding YouTube or SoundCloud or arbitrary iframe stuff for the media. And then through this example and through all the examples on the site, there's the HTML, JavaScript, and CSS that is involved in that. And so we can look at, so right here, let me blow this up a little bit. So this is all the HTML that we need, and this is actually optional, just sort of a way to placehold it in case something's loading. And then we use just a little bit of JavaScript. So TikTok is the main object that we're going to use, and we're creating a new one. The L is the element, and this goes to our ID, our HTML ID. The title is that main title up here. Ooh. And then we have our entries, which is each thing. So the date can be formatted however you want, but sometimes you need to change the option so it'll be parsed correctly. The title, the body, you can add media like this. We have some source information here. And that's it. That's really the basics of it. And you'll notice this little top progress bar. It's kind of subtle, but it's just sort of tells you where you are along the timeline. So as we scroll up, you'll see it sort of going back. And that's just a real subtle indication of where you are along the timeline instead of something a little more abstract. So that's the real basic TikTok. From there, we can go into this example section, which is a timeline of examples. And we'll go through some of the more nuanced things you can do. So first, there's a lot of like global options that we can change. So for this one, we didn't put in a title, so you don't need that sort of top timeline title thing that would go around here. We also, you can't really see this without looking at the JavaScript, but we can change how the dates get parsed. The date display is how the dates get displayed for each entry. So you'll see this is different from our last one. And this all uses moment.js, which if you haven't used and you use JavaScript, it's pretty awesome if you have any date stuff going on. There's all these types of date format options that you can use. And so that's, moment is a dependency of TikTok, and so it's already there, ready to be used. And then we also, so that's a global date display option. You can also do a date display for each entry. So this one entry just says March 1992, and this is helpful, say, if your timeline has a sort of more ambiguous date to it, where you don't know that it's on that specific date or time, but you still want to show it. And then the group by display is this little yellow group display. And so right now we're just doing it's by years, but we're just showing the last 2 digits like that. We can also reverse the order of the timeline to descending. We're not actually doing that here. The group by, so automatically TikTok will try to see the time span of your entries. So, you know, say if you have, you're going from 2002 to 2008, then it'll probably group by years. But if you're going to like 2002 to 2080, it might do by decades. But you can override this, and it can be years or months, hours, minutes, or not minutes, but hours. So you can override that automatic stuff. And then if you're, say you're using a data source like Google Spreadsheets or CSV, and the column headers are not the same that TikTok expects, key mapping is just a way to sort of easily change that instead of having to process it, which really isn't too hard anyway. So what that looks in the JavaScript code, so that date, it's all here. So the date format, this is how we parse the year. And again, this is just moment.js. And so you'll see the input for each entry is like that. That would probably not be a realistic way for someone to write the date, but just gives you that. For the key mapping, it's easier to show that. So our title is what TikTok expects, and this custom title is what you give it. And so for each entry, we have a custom title, and it gets translated to title, so TikTok knows what to do with it. Yeah. So those are the main global and sort of some other specific options. So moving on. So if you notice, TikTok kind of comes with pretty bright colors that probably don't fit into your design or your site or wherever you're using it. But it's all done with CSS, and so it's really easy to change if you know a little CSS. So this timeline, again, is just an example of how to change those colors. And what we've done here is just change them to a grayscale, and you can easily change. There's some classes and that selectors that are more easily that target specific colors, because some parts are broken up in the HTML, and so it's hard to necessarily get at that. So like the header color is not usually something you would use as a class, but this allows to get all this HTML, which is actually split up. So, and so this goes through all those examples. I won't get into too much of this, but each entry has its own ID, and so you could change the color of a specific entry like this. The progress bar is also changeable as well. You can see it. It's harder to see in the grayscale up there. So this is the CSS used for this example. So we can go further than just changing the colors. Since all this is done with CSS, we can really move things around as much as we want. This is a really ugly example to show that you can do essentially whatever you want to do with it. So we've moved the spine over to the left and the grouping over here. Entries, we've kind of made this little margin, changed colors, and then we've also moved the media field over on the left here. So, and all that CSS is down here. Unfortunately, the way HTML has to work for this, it can be a little tough to target what you need, but it should all be there. We've also put the date over on the right here too. So these next three examples are about data sources. So this one's with Google Spreadsheets and using tabletop.js to get that data. So here's the main code. Tabletop, if you haven't used it, is a way to talk to Google Spreadsheets and get data into your web app. And so we've got our Google Spreadsheet key. Let's see if we can just look at that spreadsheet real quick. Yep. So it's got the date, title, body, media source, all the fields that TikTok expects. We've even got HTML in our body over here. And so we put in the key for that sheet, and that pulls in that data, and then we just hand that over to TikTok here. But you shouldn't use Google Spreadsheets. It's a really unreliable data source. I'm surprised it even worked right now. APIs break. They rate limit things. It's a mess. So this is more of a proof of concept than anything you should actually do. But that said, TikTok will talk CSV natively. So you could download your Google Spreadsheet as a CSV and easily include that in the file. So a CSV, if you're not familiar with, is a comma separated I don't know if you guys are going to see that. Well, I'm sure you all know what a CSV is. If you don't, that's okay. It's a tabular format, much like a spreadsheet. And so we can hand that CSV over to TikTok. CSV could also, you can do it by, it doesn't have to be comma separated, it can be pipe separated, or whatever character you want. And so there's options to do that, to change that. So in this example, we've loaded in our CSV file with jQuery and then pass that over to TikTok, and TikTok automatically knows, since it's a string, that it's going to try to CSV parse it. And this is just an example with edit data, which is sort of like a spreadsheet. It's like a Google spreadsheet sort of clone. It's a little more reliable. It's dependent on GitHub, and that's where it stores your data. So it's not as necessarily friendly as far as the interface as Google Spreadsheets, but it provides an actual interface to update your data, and you can use sort of the live source. So. And we can also, so there's methods to add things to TikTok on the fly. So if for some reason you wanted to add entries as the user is scrolling or as events come in. So this is sort of a really dumb example where we're live blogging, and so this just automatically puts in a new entry every 10 seconds, maybe. and just shows what that would look like. So it automatically gets grouped by what we're doing here, and it comes in the right order. Some of these are supposed to have images. It's kind of just random. So yeah, so that one's got the image. So this actually we'll skip as we go because the way that we're actually adding content. But the main thing that we want to do is this TikTok add entry. So we can just add, and that's an entry or an array of entries, just like the rest of the stuff. And the rest of all this is really just filler to make that sort of happen randomly, like it's doing. And so TikTok is using just an HTML template, which is just a string that you can replace however you want. You can also easily replace the templating library that we're using. So by default, we use _JS, which has a really simple templating function to it. But in this example, we're using mustache. Obviously, there's no visual difference there. Here, we've created another attribute to each entry and created a specific class to do that. And so then this one gets styled differently. We can add another attribute like a subtitle and add that into the template. And so this is obviously the HTML, the container is the same, a little bit of CSS. What we've done here is added a class to each even day. So that's why that was colored differently. And then this is our new template, which is mostly just copied from the original template, but we've used mustache syntax here instead and taken out a little bit. And as far as the code goes, we're just getting that HTML that's in the script tag, the template. We're creating the mustache template function with it. And then we pass that renderer function over. So that's it. Again, it actually sounds like a lot more than it is. It's meant to be really basic, but also extensible and mobile friendly. And I won't tell you how to get there, but there's a little Easter egg on the site. We had a big discussion about whether TikTok was the Wizard of Oz character or if it was Kesha's song. It's a complete waste of time, but you gotta have fun with it. So I don't know if I'm missing questions or anything. Oh.
So apologize. Or apologies if it's loud. I don't see any questions in the Slack or anything. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. Yeah, when I went searching for TikTok online, the first I didn't put in JavaScript or anything, and it came up with that Kesha song, and I was like, oh no, what have I done?
I kind of love the song now, though.
I didn't listen to it. I'm gonna have to.
It's actually horrible.
But no, that's awesome. That's really great. I like how it is how you can add different things. Yeah, I feel like that's always a big thing, at least in my newsroom. I'll use a reusable tool, but my editor will always be like, well, we really need this subtitle in there. We just need to have it. And I'm like, fine. So it's nice if there's a way to do that.
Cool. Well, if there's no questions, I'll just kind of go into the code a little more in detail.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Alan, can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So I probably should have got this if I was paying closer attention, but what are the dependencies on this one?
Oh, yeah, that actually brings me into what I was about to do. So the dependencies are moment.js, I didn't mention that, and then underscore, which would be nice to sort of take out underscore. It'd be pretty hard to take out moment. So those are the two main dependencies. Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
So going into the code.
Can I ask a question really quickly?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I did the exact same thing. I Googled TikTok without JavaScript. Wait a minute, that's not what I want. Can you talk about kind of the impetus for why you built this and what kinds of projects sparked the idea for wanting this kind of tool?
Sure. Yeah, so most of this is driven because we've actually had a previous timeline tool that was just called timeline. Actually, so I did an article on Source that probably explains this a little more in details. I guess we can't click on these. So previously, there was this vertical timeline that was made to mostly, this was kind of, I guess it was probably 3 or 4 years ago that WNYC, before I worked here, made this. And a lot of it, I think, was more geared because the site wasn't mobile friendly, so you had to sort of fit in the article template and the CSS, and that was more of a very, not a big width and a long vertical space. So it was sort of driven around that. And also to not necessarily make a timeline that you have to click through. By being vertical, you can just scroll, which is, arguably a little more natural way to kind of go through content. And it lends itself to sort of mobile use better. So those are the main sort of considerations as far as the vertical timeline. Again, the timeline JS is definitely a good tool, but I think it serves a little more, at least on the design side, serves a little different purpose. So that was done about 4 years ago. Actually, at my past job at MinPost, we worked on sort of making the code a little more reusable. And then about 6 months ago, we just decided to revamp it and kind of start over. So that's the main reason it exists. Hopefully that answered that. So getting into the code. So all the code is up on GitHub and our data news account. Make this a little bigger. So you can use Bower or NPM to install if you want to. It works with Browserify or Require.js as far as how you might include it. It does depend on moment.js and underscore.js. We use this font by the Lato font. If it's there, otherwise it just defaults to sans serif of some sort. And as far as getting it on your page, real quick, there's actually just a set of CDN versions here that you can just copy and paste into your HTML if you don't want to worry about sort of downloading it and that sort of stuff. We've sort of gone through the basic JS, which is just this. Here's a little more description on what needs to be in those entries or could be in those entries, what the CSV data could look like. and all the details around all those options. And what methods? You have the update, which sort of just re-renders everything. And then you have the add, which you can add entries with. I think that's the code behind it. As far as getting into like the architecture of the library, hopefully none of this is too, or hopefully most of it's kind of standard JavaScript practices. Not that there's too standard of practices with JavaScript. But I'll just go through some of the stuff that we're going on here. So a few of these dot files are mostly just code quality, code style enforcements. So editor config is really amazing. It's actually pretty simple. It just sort of tells your editor that this project uses tabs or uses 2 spaces or 4 spaces, and you can tell it what kind of files it is. So for this, like Python uses 4 spaces, but maybe by default use, and then JS uses 2 spaces, which seem fairly arbitrary when you're coding, but consistency across those sorts of things is really helpful. What's great about editor config is that most IDEs, your code editor, will have, let's see, there's a list of them, will have some sort of plugin. So I use Atom, it's got a plugin, and so it automatically sort of does the stuff there to make sure that all that stuff is true. And will change, when you hit tab, it'll either put a tab or 2 spaces or whatever you need. The JS CS, RC, I don't actually know what all this stuff stands for. It's another code quality tool, and again, there's plugins and stuff like that. This is all about enforcing really the code style, and so what that means is, let's see if I can get some of these rules. So say, for instance, in JavaScript, curly brackets are optional right after an if statement, but it's a really good practice to have them for some reasons, good reasons. So like this option will ensure that that happens, and then your code editor will tell you, and it just helps enforce a code style. So again, that's another plugin. Really puts it the same way. JS hint is the same sort of thing, but instead of code style, it's really looking at sort of common code errors and mistakes that you might make in your JavaScript. So that's pretty helpful. Again, these are all like optional things. There's a little section at the bottom of the README, or near it, that tells about these code styles, these sort of code consistency things, but they're all sort of optional plugins. You don't force it. I mean, the building forces it a little bit, but it's a lot easier to just have the plugin in your editor. So let's see. What else?
Alan, what editor do you use? Did you say?
I use Atom.
Atom.
Which is made by GitHub.
Oh, okay. Is that it's a free and it's only for Mac?
No, I believe there's probably a Windows version. I'm not entirely sure. It's atom.io.
Cool.
Yeah, it looks like there's some Windows versions for them. It's really good. I actually I wouldn't say it's better than other things necessarily, but it's pretty straightforward. So I like to use it. Let's see. We do have some tests. Automatic testing is pretty helpful. A lot of our tests are unit tests and not like integration tests, so they don't test like the interface. So what happens if someone clicks on things or stuff like that? It's more like, well, are we parsing the dates right? And if you give it specific options, is it all going to build? So we write those in Mocha. And I won't get into too many details, but we describe, this is our class, and this is the constructor, et cetera, et cetera. It's just making sure things equal each other when you give it specific options. And then to run those tests, we use Karma. And Karma is this sort of really robust test runner. I was trying to get into some multiple browser testing, but there's no good free service that works well. So, but it's easy to run some basic browser tests with Karma on your machine. Again, I won't go into too many details there, but it's a good tool. And we use Travis. Travis is a continuous integration service. And what that means is that whenever you make a commit to something and you push it up to GitHub or whatever repo, Travis will automatically run the tests you have and let you know if you broke something or if it's passing. And just a really easy, automatic way to ensure that your code is not breaking. And the configuration for it is usually really simple. It's just sort of installation commands and then what language you want to run. And I think we use Gulp as for a build process. There's also Grunt and I think Broccoli. There's not. They both have their pluses and minuses. We're using a lot of different things to ensure sort of a specific build. And what building is with JavaScript is essentially you take the JavaScript, you process it through those like the JS hint or the JSCS stuff, and then maybe you combine your JavaScript files together, maybe you minify them, make them smaller and more compressed and get rid of all the comments and stuff like that. So then you have a really sort of slim version of your JavaScript ready to go for other people to use or yourself. I don't know if I really need to go through too much of this. But basically there's some tasks at the bottom. This is sort of the part where we put it all together into commands. Where we run our JS tests, browser tests, and styles. We do some style enforcement stuff too, as well, as far as the CSS goes, and use auto prefixer to ensure that it works across browsers if you're using some newer CSS properties. And there's a little built-in web server for development. And I think that's all I got, really.
That's great. I really thank you so much for going into all of the like those like background plugins. I feel like I work for a pretty small newsroom, and we it's just me and I mean like most of us, and I've never dabbled with any of that, but now I have like a little bit of knowledge into that. I'll definitely be looking into that. That's cool. What do you use for like do you use a virtual environment to do your development, like a local development?
No, mostly it's just especially for the JavaScript, HTML stuff, it's just right on my machine.
I just know there was a lot of talk in the Slack lately about virtual environments, and it just seems like that's much more like a Python thing. I don't know, than like necessarily like a JavaScript thing. But
well, I think, yeah, JavaScript doesn't have quite the same thing as virtual environment. The NPM, as far as module management stuff, is a little more contained than in Python, or Python without a little extra help. Same thing with Ruby, and PHP is a whole other thing. But also, some people like to work on like virtual machines, like Vagrant or other things, so that their desktop is not muckied up with some of the libraries that need to be installed. But I've never gotten into that. I think also if you work on Windows, the environment that your code's going to run on is often really different, because most of the time you're probably running on Linux as far as the server is concerned. For the JavaScript stuff and the browser stuff, the environment is, just up to the browser, which has nothing to do with operating system much.
Okay, another thing about, I've been using Vagrant lately, and another cool thing about it is just making sure all your versions are all aligned, I guess. Because I'm basically using Vagrant to work on stuff on our website and basically make sure I have the right versions of like jQuery and Python and everything else. So if I'm doing something on my local machine that's a newer version, that won't actually work on our actual website. Using Vagrant is stopping me from doing that, which is helpful.
Yeah, it definitely provides like a really solid, predictable sandbox to do work in.
I forgot about your hat.
Same.
Good. So good. Awesome. Well, were there any other questions, or Alan, did you have anything?
Well, I just want to say it's it's all on GitHub, and it's we would love any contributions, even if that's like, this is broken, can you fix it for me? That's okay. It doesn't have to be a here's code contribution. So do feel free to try it out.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Alan. That was great.
No problem.
All right. Sweet. All right. Yeah. Thanks. I'm gonna stop the broadcast now. I took notes in the thing. If you have anything to add, Alan. Also, Chris, thanks for filming in case there was a Google failure again, I'm assuming is what's going on over there. I love it. But, yeah. Awesome. Success.
Cool. Thanks.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
See ya.
Bye.
Nothing to do with operating system much.
Okay, another thing about, I've been using Vagrant lately, and another cool thing about it is just making sure all your versions are all aligned, I guess. Because I'm basically using Vagrant to to work on stuff on our website and basically make sure I have the right versions of like jQuery and Python and everything else. So if I'm doing something on my local machine that's a newer version that won't actually work on our actual website, using Vagrant is stopping me from doing that, which is helpful.
Yeah, it definitely provides like a really solid, predictable sandbox to do work in.
I forgot about your hat.
Same.
Good. So good. Awesome. Well, were there any other questions, or Alan, did you have anything?
Well, I just want to say it's it's all on GitHub, and it's we would love any contributions, even if that's like, this is broken, can you fix it for me? That's okay. It doesn't have to be a here's code contribution. So do feel free to try it out.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Alan. That was great.
No problem.
All right. Sweet. All right. Yeah. Thanks. I'm gonna stop the broadcast now. I took notes in the thing. If you have anything to add, Alan. Also, Chris, thanks for filming in case there was a Google failure again, I'm assuming is what's going on over there. I love it. But, yeah. Awesome. Success.
Cool. Thanks.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
See ya.
Bye.